You know the type, right? Someone who is just incredibly, obviously bright, but who just doesn't seem to live up to all that potential. It's this classic, frustrating mystery. So today, we're going to dive in and uncover what's really going on with so-called gifted underachievement. Our first instinct when we see this gap between brilliance and performance is to jump to a simple conclusion. They must be lazy. But what if that's not just a little bit wrong, but completely wrong? What if the issue isn't with the person at all? Okay, so first up, let's tackle the myth that we're all so familiar with. This whole story of the lazy genius. It's a narrative that really shapes how we think about talent and effort, and frankly, it's time we took a much closer look.
This phrase. I bet you've either heard this or maybe even said it yourself. It's the classic line, isn't it? It perfectly captures that mix of admiration for someone's potential and just total frustration with what they're actually doing.
And this is where the conflict really becomes clear. On one side, you've got the huge expectation. We see this natural brilliance, and we expect to see effortless success and high grades. But then, the reality we actually get, it's often disengagement, frustration, and something that looks a lot like apathy. That's the gap that causes all the confusion.
So what do we do with that gap? Well, our default move is to slap a label on it. We call it laziness. We say they don't have motivation or a good work ethic. It's a simple diagnosis, but as we're about to find out, it's the wrong one.
And here's where we pivot. We need to ask a totally different question. What if this has nothing to do with a character flaw? What if it's not about them, but about their environment? This one question is going to take us from myth straight into science.
So let's get into the science of it all, because this is where things get really fascinating. It turns out the behavior we've been calling laziness is often a very specific psychological state, a different kind of boredom that gifted minds are especially prone to. Now look at this definition right here. This is the core idea. Our sources define this kind of boredom as what happens when information is processed too easily. Just let that sink in for a second. The problem isn't having nothing to do, it's that the task requires almost zero mental effort.
Yeah, and it's so important to get this distinction. This is not the boredom you feel when you're waiting in a long line at the store. Nope. This is the boredom a supercomputer would feel if you asked it to calculate 2 plus 2. The brain is basically an engine that's idling, primed for a challenge that just never shows up. Okay, so if the problem is that everything is too easy, too smooth, then the solution has to be about adding some difficulty, right? This brings us to a really cool concept, the need for intellectual friction. I absolutely love this analogy because it makes the whole idea crystal clear. Picture a super powerful car sitting on a perfect sheet of ice. The engine can roar, the tires can spin at 1,000 miles an hour, but the car is going absolutely nowhere. There's no friction, no grip, no traction. It's just spinning uselessly. Well, the gifted brain is that powerful engine. It needs the rough pavement of a good challenge, that intellectual friction to actually grip the problem and start moving forward. So let's just walk through how this actually happens. It all starts with a task that's way too simple. The brain processes it without even breaking a sweat, so zero intellectual friction gets generated. And because the brain isn't engaged, the mind starts to drift. It actively goes looking for something, anything that's more stimulating. And the result that we see from the outside? Disengagement, boredom, apathy. And it all comes back to this. Just like that tire on the ice. Without a worthy challenge for the mind to really grab onto, it just spins in place. All that energy, all that potential, it's just not being converted into motion. So, armed with this new understanding, we have to completely rethink what underachievement even is. It's not a problem with the person. It's a mismatch between the person and the task they're given. This slide just lays out the shift in perspective so perfectly. The old view sees a character flaw, a problem with the student, and it calls them lazy. But the new and much more accurate view sees an environmental mismatch. The problem isn't the student, it's the task. And this reframes the whole diagnosis from they are lazy to they are unchallenged. And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. We need to stop talking about a lack of motivation and start talking about a lack of challenge. The desire to engage, the motivation, it's already there. It just needs to be woken up by a task that's actually worthy of its attention. And why does all this matter so much? Well, for starters, it moves us away from blaming the person and toward understanding the situation. It encourages all of us, parents, teachers, bosses, to focus on finding the right level of difficulty, that sweet spot of intellectual friction. And maybe the most important part? It validates the experience of the person who feels so frustrated and misunderstood, because it tells them, you're not broken, you're not lazy, you're just bored. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. We spend so much energy trying to make learning and work easier. But for these minds, what if the real solution isn't about making things easy at all, but about finding just the right kind of hard?